They called it love. The town called it treason. When Genevieve Harper kissed an Apache warrior beneath the willow tree, she didn't just break her father's heart. She lit the fuse to a war that would consume Silver Creek. One whispered promise, one stolen moment. And suddenly rifles were loaded on both sides, ready to paint the desert red. This is the story of how two hearts stopped a massacre, but first they had to survive it. Stay until the end and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The willow tree had been Genevieve's secret for 3 years. It stood alone on the eastern edge of her father's property, where the manicured lawns of Silver Creek gave way to wild grass and red desert soil. Most evenings she told her father she needed air. He never questioned it. Mayor Thomas Harper was too busy planning expansion projects and railway negotiations to notice his daughter slipping through the garden gate with a book she never read and a shawl she never needed. But she never went there to be alone. Nahali was always waiting. The first time she'd seen him, she'd been 16 and stupid, with the kind of bravery that comes from never knowing real danger. She'd ridden too far from town, chasing a white mare that had broken loose from the stable. The sun had been setting, painting the mesas amber and violet, and she'd been so focused on the horse that she hadn't noticed the cliff until her boot slipped on loose shale. She remembered the fall, the sick weightlessness, the sky spinning her scream cut short by the impact that knocked the air from her lungs. She remembered the pain lancing through her ankle, the metallic taste of fear in her mouth. And then she remembered strong hands pulling her back from the edge, a voice speaking words she didn't understand, and dark eyes that held something she'd never seen in the eyes of Silver Creek's men. Concern, real concern, not the performative kind her father's friends showed at Sunday socials. "You're hurt," he'd said in careful English, his accent turning the words into something almost musical. "Don't move." She should have been terrified. Her entire life she'd been taught that the Apache were savages, raiders who scalped settlers and burned homesteads, demons in human skin who wanted nothing more than to destroy everything her father had built. But this man had bandaged her ankle with strips torn from his own shirt, had helped her back onto her horse with hands that were gentle despite their calluses, and had asked for nothing in return. "What's your name?" she'd asked, breathless from pain and something else she couldn't name. He'd hesitated, dark hair falling across his face. Then quietly, "Nahali. I'm Genevieve. I know who you are, Genevieve Harper." His expression had been unreadable. "You should go home before dark comes." She'd wanted to say something else, "thank you," or maybe "don't go," or perhaps "why do you speak English so well?" But he'd already been moving away, disappearing into the sagebrush like smoke, like he'd never been there at all. She'd told no one, not her father, not her mother before the fever took her 2 years prior, not even her cousin Elizabeth, who shared every other secret. Instead, she'd returned to that spot every evening for a week, her ankle wrapped in proper bandages, now her heart wrapped in something she didn't dare examine too closely. On the 8th evening, he'd been there. On the 9th, they'd talked carefully, like people learning a new language made of glances and pauses. He'd told her about his grandfather who'd fought against the Mexican army, and one about his mother who wove baskets so beautiful they looked like captured water, about his younger sister who could track a rabbit through solid rock. She'd told him about her mother's death, about the suffocating expectations of being the mayor's only daughter, about the way the women of Silver Creek spoke in whispers and smiles that never reached their eyes, about the books she read in secret because her father thought education made women difficult. On the 14th evening beneath that willow tree, he'd kissed her. And Genevieve Harper had understood finally what all those forbidden novels had been trying to say. That was 3 years ago. She was 19 now, old enough to know better, old enough to know exactly what she was risking. "You're late," Nahali said as she ducked beneath the willow's curtain of branches. Moonlight filtered through the leaves, dappling his skin silver. He was sitting with his back against the trunk, one knee drawn up, that hawk pendant she loved hanging against his bare chest. He looked like something carved from the desert itself, all bronze skin and lean muscle and dark eyes that saw too much. Father had guests. Genevieve settled beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. That small contact sent electricity down her spine, the way it always did. Council members. They stayed for dinner. I thought they'd never leave. What were they discussing? There was an edge to his voice that hadn't been there before. These past few months he'd grown more tense, more watchful. She knew why. Everyone knew why. Silver Creek was expanding, and that expansion meant pushing into Apache territory. Her father called it progress. Nahali's people called it theft. The railway, she admitted quietly. Father wants to extend the line through Canyon de Chelly. Nahali went very still. That's sacred ground. I know. Your father knows this. He doesn't care. She turned to face him, taking his hand. His fingers were warm, rough from bowstrings and horse reins. Nahali, I've tried talking to him. I've tried explaining. You can't explain what he refuses to understand. But his thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture that had become their silent language. Comfort, connection, I'm here. He sees land, we see our ancestors. To him, we're obstacles. To us, this is home. Then leave, Genevieve said suddenly, urgently. Take your family. Go north, go south, just run. He looked at her with something like disappointment. Is that what you'd do? I'd survive. No. He brought her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. You'd fight. I've seen you with your father. You don't surrender. The word hung between them heavy with meaning. He'd said it before surrender, always in that specific way, with that specific look. When they were alone beneath the willow and the world narrowed to just skin and breath and the sound of her name in his mouth. Surrender to me, he whispered now, and there it was, that invitation that was also a challenge, that offer of freedom disguised as submission. She kissed him. It wasn't gentle. 3 years of hiding had made them hungry, made every stolen moment sharp with desperation. His hand cupped the back of her neck, fingers threading through her hair, sending pins scattering to the ground. She pressed closer, tasting sage smoke and summer heat, feeling his heart hammering against her palm. This was wrong. This was dangerous. This was the most honest thing in her entire life. Come with me, she breathed against his mouth. Tonight, right now, we'll go somewhere they can't find us. California, maybe, or they'll hunt us. Let them. Genevieve. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his expression pained. You don't understand what you're asking. Your father would send men, and my people. His jaw tightened. Itu already suspects. He watches me, questions where I go at night. Itu, his cousin, his brother in all but blood, and the most vocal opponent of any peace with Silver Creek. Genevieve had never met him, but she'd heard Nahali speak of him often enough to know he was dangerous, traditional, unforgiving. Then we'll be careful, she insisted. We have been careful. Have we? He gestured at the willow, at the worn patch of ground where they'd spent countless nights. This tree is barely half a mile from your house. Anyone could. A twig snapped. They both froze. Nahali's hand moved to the knife at his belt so fast it seemed like teleportation, and Genevieve's breath stopped completely in her lungs. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then from the darkness beyond the willow's veil, footsteps. Running footsteps. Shit, Genevieve whispered. She knew those footsteps. She'd heard them her entire life, following her through the Harper house, bringing tea and fixing her hair, and listening at doors her father thought were closed. Margaret, she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Margaret, wait. But the footsteps didn't stop. They ran toward the house, toward her father, toward everything Genevieve had spent 3 years trying to prevent. Nahali was already moving, already disappearing into the sagebrush, like water into sand. I have to go. No, wait. But he was gone, and Genevieve was alone beneath the willow with kiss-swollen lips and Margaret's footsteps echoing like gunshots in the distance. She ran after her, her skirts tangled around her legs, her loose hair whipped into her eyes, but she ran anyway, calling Margaret's name until her throat was raw. The house loomed ahead, all lit windows, and white columns a monument to her father's vision of civilization carved into the desert. She caught up with Margaret at the kitchen door. "Margaret, please." Genevieve grabbed her arm, spinning her around. The older woman's face was pale, her eyes wide with something between shock and horror. She'd been the Harper family's housekeeper for 15 years. She'd helped raise Genevieve after her mother died. She'd been more parent than servant, and now she looked at Genevieve like she was a stranger. "Miss Genevieve," Margaret whispered, her voice shaking. "What have you done?" "Nothing. I haven't. I saw you." Margaret pulled her arm free, stepping back. "I saw you with that with him. Dear godchild, do you have any idea? He's not what you think." Genevieve's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "Margaret, please, if you tell my father, if I tell him—" Margaret's voice rose sharp with panic. "Genevieve, the whole town will know by morning. Do you think I'm the only one who's noticed you sneaking out? Mrs. Patterson saw you last week. The stable boy's been talking. People aren't blind." The world tilted. Genevieve felt it, that sickening lurch of everything she'd built crashing down around her. No, that's not. He's Apache." Margaret said it like a death sentence. "Your father will—" She pressed her hands to her mouth, shaking her head. "Oh, Miss Genevieve, what have you done?" What had she done? Genevieve stood there in the moonlight, her hair wild, her lips still burning from Nahali's kiss, and tried to find an answer. But there was no answer that would satisfy Margaret, no explanation that would make this acceptable. She'd fallen in love with the enemy. She'd betrayed every expectation, every rule, every careful line her father had drawn between civilization and savagery. And she'd do it again. "I love him," she said quietly, simply. Like that explained everything. Maybe it did. Margaret's expression crumpled. "That doesn't matter, child. Love doesn't matter, not here, not for you." She looked toward the house where light spilled from Mayor Harper's study. "You need to go inside, clean yourself up. We'll tell your father you were walking. We'll say—" "No." Genevieve's voice was steady now, certain. "I won't lie anymore." "Then you'll destroy yourself." Margaret stepped closer, her face pleading. "And him. They'll kill him, Genevieve. Your father will make sure of it. Sheriff Briggs will make sure of it." "Is that what you want?" Colin Briggs, the man her father had chosen for her, the man she was supposed to marry next spring, a union that would cement her father's political power and give Briggs legitimacy he'd never earned on his own. He was 10 years her senior, handsome in a cold way, and he looked at her like she was a prize to be won rather than a person to be known. She'd told her father no a dozen times. He'd smiled and told her she'd change in her mind. "I won't marry Colin," Genevieve said. "You might not have a choice." Margaret's voice broke. "Please, Miss Genevieve, please go inside. We'll figure this out. The front door opened. Light flooded the porch, and Mayor Thomas Harper stepped out, still dressed in his dinner clothes, his silver hair gleaming. He looked between Genevieve and Margaret, and his expression shifted from confusion to something darker. "Genevieve." His voice carried that edge of authority that had cowed town councils and railroad barons. "What's going on?" Behind him, Sheriff Briggs emerged from the house, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. Of course he was still here. Of course he'd stayed late. He smiled at Genevieve, that possessive smile that made her skin crawl, and she knew that whatever happened next would be bad. Margaret looked at Genevieve one last time, her eyes begging, "Say nothing, lie, save yourself." But Genevieve had been saving herself her entire life. She was tired. "Father," she said clearly, "we need to talk." The words felt like jumping off a cliff, like that day 3 years ago when she'd fallen and Nahali had caught her. Except this time, there was no one to catch her. This time, she was choosing to fall. Mayor Harper's study smelled like tobacco and old leather. Genevieve had spent her childhood in this room, doing lessons at the desk by the window while her father worked learning to stay quiet and small and acceptable. Now she stood in the center of the Persian rug her father had shipped from Boston, her chin up, her hands steady, and told him everything. Almost everything. She didn't mention the willow tree or how many nights they'd spent there, or the way Nahali's hands felt against her skin. Some things were hers to keep. But she told him about the first meeting, about the conversations, about how Nahali had taught her to see the desert as something living rather than something to be conquered, how he'd shared stories of his people that made them human instead of monsters. She told him she loved Nahali. She told him she wouldn't marry Colin Briggs, and she watched her father's face turn to stone. Sheriff Briggs stood by the door, his earlier smile gone, replaced by something ugly and cold. Margaret hovered near the bookshelf, wringing her hands. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked like a countdown. "You're telling me," Mayor Harper said slowly, each word precise and sharp, "that you've been consorting with an Apache for 3 years on my property. I'm telling you, I've fallen in love with a good man who happens to be Apache." "There's no such thing." The words came from Briggs, low and venomous. "They're animals, Genevieve. Every last one of them." "Colin, that's enough." Mayor Harper raised a hand, but his eyes never left his daughter. "Genevieve, do you understand what you've done? The position you've put this family in, this town?" "I haven't hurt anyone. You've embarrassed us." His voice rose, cracking like a whip. "You've made us a laughingstock. The mayor's daughter sneaking around with—" He seemed unable to finish the sentence. "What did you think would happen, that I'd welcome him into our home, give you my blessing? I thought you'd understand that people aren't their bloodlines. This isn't about bloodlines." He slammed his hand on the desk, making Margaret flinch. "This is about survival, about civilization. We're trying to build something here, Genevieve. Something lasting. And he gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the desert, toward Nahali's people. "They want to drag us back to barbarism. Or maybe we're dragging them toward extinction," Genevieve shot back. "Did you ever think of that? You're taking their land, Father, their water, their sacred places, and you call it progress. I call it the future." Mayor Harper moved around the desk, his face flushed with anger, and something else, maybe fear, maybe grief. "You're my daughter, my only child. I've given you everything, education, comfort, position, and this is how you repay me. I didn't ask for any of it." The words came out harder than she meant them, but she didn't take them back. "I didn't ask to be your political pawn. I didn't ask to marry a man I don't love so you can secure votes. I'm not your property, Father." "No." His voice went quiet, dangerous. "But you are my responsibility, and I'm telling you right now, this ends tonight. You will not see him again. You will not speak of him, Dan. And in the spring you will marry Colin as planned." "I won't." "You will." He turned to Briggs. "Colin, I want men stationed around the property. If that Apache comes near my daughter again, shoot him." Genevieve's blood turned to ice. "Father, no. You don't get a vote anymore, Genevieve." Mayor Harper's face was hard, implacable. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Margaret, take her upstairs. Lock her in her room. She doesn't leave until she comes to her senses." "Sir, I don't think—" Margaret began, but Mayor Harper cut her off with a look. "That's an order." Everything was happening too fast. Genevieve felt Margaret's hand on her arm, gentle but insistent, pulling her toward the door. She wanted to fight, to scream, to run, but Briggs was blocking the exit, his hand still on his gun, and her father's face held no mercy. "Father, please," she tried one more time. "If you do this, if you hurt him, I'll never forgive you." "Then I'll learn to live with that," Mayor Harper said. "Better your hatred than your death." Margaret pulled her from the room, up the stairs, down the hallway, to her childhood bedroom. The door closed. The lock clicked, and Genevieve was alone, trapped in a white-walled prison that smelled like lavender and lies. She went to the window. The willow tree was just visible in the distance, a dark shape against the moonlit desert. Somewhere out there, Nahali was riding home, unaware that everything had changed. Unaware that by sunrise the entire town would know. Unaware that men with rifles would be looking for him. Genevieve pressed her forehead against the glass and made herself a promise. She would get out. She would warn him, and if necessary, she would burn Silver Creek to the ground to keep him safe. Because Margaret had been wrong about one thing. Love did matter. It mattered more than anything. The lock on Genevieve's door was old brass, installed when she was 12 and prone to nightmares. It had never been meant to keep her in, only to keep the world out. Margaret probably thought it would hold until morning, until Genevieve's anger cooled into something manageable, something her father could shape back into obedience. Margaret had always underestimated her. Genevieve waited 2 hours, long enough for the house to settle into sleep, for the floorboards to stop creaking under Margaret's worried pacing, for her father's study lamp to finally go dark. Long enough for the moon to climb higher, casting silver ladders through her window. She'd packed a small bag, practical clothes, not the silk and lace her father preferred. A canteen, matches, the silver locket her mother had given her before the fever took her back, when Genevieve still believed good people were rewarded and bad people were punished, and the world made sense. She knew better now. The window opened soundlessly. She'd oiled the hinges years ago during a different rebellion, sneaking out to read by the creek, to ride horses too fast, to be anything other than the mayor's perfect daughter. That girl seemed like a stranger now. That girl hadn't known what it meant to choose between love and safety, between truth and survival. The trellis was sturdy beneath her hands. Roses caught at her sleeves, thorns drawing blood, but she didn't slow down. The ground rushed up to meet her boots, solid and real, and then she was running across the lawn toward the stables. The horses nickeled softly as she entered. Her mare, Ophelia, tossed her head like she'd been expecting this. Maybe she had. Animals always knew when storms were coming. "Shh, girl," Genevieve whispered, working quickly to saddle her. "We have to be quiet. We have to... going somewhere." Her heart stopped. She spun around, and there was Colin Briggs, leaning against the stable door with his arms crossed, and that smile, that terrible smile, that said he'd won something she hadn't known they were competing for. "Colin," she kept her voice steady even as her mind raced. "I need air. I was just running to him." He pushed off the door frame, moving closer. He wasn't wearing his badge, but his gun still hung at his hip. He always wore his gun. "Your father warned me you might try something stupid. Guess he knows you better than I thought. Let me pass." "Can't do that, Genevieve." He stepped between her and the door, blocking the moonlight. "See, your father put me in charge of keeping you safe. And you riding off into Apache territory in the middle of the night, that's not safe. That's suicide." "Then I'll die free." Something flickered across his face, anger maybe, or wounded pride. "You really love him, that savage." The word made her flinch, but she didn't back down. "His name is Nahali, and yes. What's he got that I don't—" Colin moved closer, close enough that she could smell whiskey on his breath. He'd been drinking. That was dangerous. Drunk men did stupid things, cruel things. "I'm offering you everything, Genevieve. This whole town will be ours. Your father's already promised." "I don't want the town." "Then what do you want?" His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to mean something. "Some fantasy, some Romeo and Juliet nonsense. Wake up. He's Apache. You're the mayor's daughter. That story ends one way, and it ain't pretty. Let go of me. Make me." He pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. His thumb traced her jaw, possessive and wrong. "I could make you happy, Genevieve. I could give you a good life, better than anything he could." She kneed him in the groin. He went down hard, cursing, and she didn't wait to see if he'd get back up. She grabbed Ophelia's reins, swung into the saddle, and kicked hard. The mare bolted, hooves thundering against packed earth, and then they were flying through the darkness, with Colin's shouts fading behind them. The desert opened up before her like a held breath. She'd ridden these trails before, always in daylight, always with Nahali beside her showing her the way. Now everything looked different, shadows twisted into monsters, familiar landmarks swallowed by darkness. But she kept riding, kept pushing Ophelia faster, because somewhere out there, Nahali was sleeping and men with rifles were loading ammunition, and dawn was coming too fast. She found the Apache camp just as the sky began to pale. It wasn't much a cluster of wickiups scattered across a canyon floor, cook fires smoking in the pre-dawn chill, horses corralled near a thin stream. She'd never seen it before. Nahali had never brought her here, never wanted to risk his people's safety for their stolen moments. But he'd described it enough times that she recognized the twin mesas standing guard like sentinels, the way the canyon walls curved like cupped hands. She dismounted at the canyon's edge, her legs shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. Ophelia snorted uneasy. The camp below was waking up. She could see figures moving between the wickiups, could hear voices rising in a language she didn't understand. Then she saw him. Nahali emerged from one of the larger dwellings, bare-chested. Despite the cold, his hair loose around his shoulders. He was talking to another man, older, with silver threading through his braids and a face like carved stone. His grandfather, maybe, or one of the elders Nahali spoke of with such reverence. She started down the slope before she could talk herself out of it. She made it maybe 20 feet before arrows appeared. 3 of them pointed at her chest, held by warriors who'd materialized from the rocks like ghosts. They didn't speak, didn't threaten. They didn't have to. The message was clear: stop or die. Genevieve stopped. She raised her hands slowly, carefully, the way Nahali had taught her to approach wild horses. "I'm looking for Nahali," she said, her voice carrying across the canyon. "Please, I need to speak with Nahali." The warriors didn't lower their arrows, but one of them turned his head and called out something sharp, and suddenly the entire camp was looking at her. Women pulled children behind them, men reached for weapons, and Nahali broke into a run. He covered the distance between them in seconds, his face a mask of shock and fear. "Genevieve, why are you here?" He looked past her, scanning the canyon rim. "Did someone follow you?" "No, I don't think so. I was careful." The words tumbled out too fast. "Nahali, something happened. Margaret saw us. She told my father. He knows. Everyone's going to know. Colin's putting men on patrol and they have orders to—" Her voice cracked. "They're going to kill you if you come near me." His expression didn't change. That scared her more than anything, the way he went perfectly still, perfectly calm, like he'd been expecting this, like he'd always known this day would come. "You shouldn't have come here," he said quietly. "Where else would I go? Home, back to Silver Creek, back to safety." "I'm not leaving you, Genevieve." He reached for her, then seemed to remember the warriors still watching, and dropped his hand. "You don't understand what you've done. Coming here, being seen here, you've put yourself in danger. My people, they don't trust white people," she finished. "I know, you've told me, but I had to warn you. I had to—" "Who is this?" The voice came from behind Nahali, low and sharp as a blade. Genevieve looked past him and saw another warrior approaching, younger than the elder, older than Nahali, with the same proud bearing but harder eyes. He moved like violence given form, all coiled muscle and barely restrained fury. Nahali tensed. "Etu, this is—" "I know who she is." Etu's English was perfect, unaccented, which somehow made his words more dangerous. "The mayor's daughter, the reason you've been sneaking away at night, the reason you smell like white women's perfume and lies. Cousin, please, don't." Etu stepped closer, ignoring Nahali, focusing entirely on Genevieve. "You have a lot of nerve riding into our camp. Did you think we'd welcome you, feed you, protect you from your own people? I thought—" Genevieve's throat was dry. "I thought Nahali would want to know his life is in danger." His life has been in danger since your father decided our land belonged to his railroad. Itu smiled, and it was the coldest thing Genevieve had ever seen. But thank you for the warning. Now get out. Itu. Nahali started, but Itu cut him off with a gesture. No, this ends now. You want to throw your life away for some white girl, fine. But you don't bring her here. You don't contaminate our camp with her presence. And you sure as hell don't expect us to risk our necks protecting her when her father comes looking. She came to help. She came because she's selfish. Itu turned to face Nahali fully. Look at her. Look at what she's wearing. Those are riding clothes, Nahali. She's dressed for running. She didn't come to warn you. She came because she wants you to run away with her. Genevieve felt her face flush. He wasn't wrong. The thought had been there underneath the fear, underneath the urgency, the fantasy of disappearing together, of finding some place where nobody knew them, where they could just be. And if I do, Nahali's voice was quiet, dangerous in its own way. If I choose to leave, then you're a traitor. Itu said it simply, like he was commenting on the weather. And we have ways of dealing with traitors. The words hung in the cold air like smoke. The warriors surrounding them shifted, arrows still drawn, and Genevieve understood with sudden clarity that she wasn't the only one in danger here. Nahali was balanced on a knife's edge, caught between two worlds that both wanted to claim him. Itu, please. A woman's voice broke the tension. Genevieve turned and saw her, an older Apache woman with silver hair and eyes like Nahali's, moving through the crowd with the authority of someone who'd earned respect rather than demanded it. That's enough. Mother, Itu began, but she silenced him with a look. I said enough. She stopped in front of Genevieve, studying her with an intensity that made Genevieve want to squirm. You're the girl from the willow tree. It wasn't a question. Genevieve nodded anyway. Yes, ma'am. And you love my son? Yes, no hesitation, no shame. The woman, Nahali's mother, sighed deeply. Love makes fools of us all. She glanced at Nahali, and something passed between them, some silent conversation Genevieve couldn't parse. Then she looked back at Genevieve. Your father will come looking for you. When he does, he won't come alone. I know, and you came anyway. I had to. Nahali's mother studied her for another long moment, then nodded once. You're brave. Stupid, but brave. She turned to the watching crowd and said something in Apache, a string of words that made Itu curse and storm away, made the warriors lower their arrows reluctantly, made the women whisper behind their hands. What did you say? Genevieve asked. I told them you're under my protection, for now. She looked at Nahali. Take her to your wiki-up. Keep her out of sight. We'll deal with the consequences when they come. Mother, if the elders find out, the elders will hear it from me. Her expression softened slightly. I don't approve of this, Nahali. You know that. But I won't let them kill her just for loving you. That's not who we are. She walked away before anyone could argue her back straight, her steps sure. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly casting looks over their shoulders that ranged from curious to hostile. Only Itu remained watching from across the camp with fury in his eyes. Nahali touched Genevieve's elbow carefully as if she might shatter. Come on, before someone changes their mind. His wiki-up was small but clean, with blankets piled in one corner and a fire pit in the center. Weapons hung from the walls, bows, knives, a rifle that looked newer than the rest. Genevieve had imagined this space so many times, wondered what his life looked like when he wasn't with her. Now she was here, and it felt both familiar and impossibly foreign. You shouldn't have come, Nahali said again, but this time his voice was softer. Genevieve, what were you thinking? I was thinking they were going to kill you. She turned to face him, and suddenly all the adrenaline that had carried her through the night drained away, leaving only exhaustion and fear. My father gave orders, Collins organizing patrols. If you'd come to the willow tree tonight, I wouldn't have. He caught her hand, threading their fingers together. I knew something was wrong. I felt it. I wasn't going to risk. But you didn't know. Not for certain. She squeezed his hand tight enough to hurt. I had to make sure you were safe. And now you're trapped here. He gestured at the wiki up at the camp beyond. You heard, Etu. You heard my mother. They won't let you leave easily. And when your father finds out you're here, then we run, like I said. We leave tonight, we head north, Genevieve. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. If we run, they'll hunt us. Both sides. My people will see me as a deserter. Yours will see you as a captive. We won't make it 50 miles. Then what? Her voice broke. We just wait here for the war to start, because it's coming, Nahali. You know it's coming. My father won't let this go, and Etu wants blood. He's wanted it for years. Nahali's jaw tightened. His wife died in a raid last spring, killed by prospectors who claimed they were defending themselves. He's been looking for an excuse to strike back ever since. Genevieve felt ice slide down her spine. And I just gave him one. No, this isn't your fault. But his eyes said otherwise. His eyes said everything was falling apart, and maybe it always had been, and they'd been fools to think love could stop it. She kissed him, hard and desperate, and trying to memorize the taste of him, the feel of his hands in her hair, the way he breathed her name like a prayer, because tomorrow everything might be ash and blood, but right now, he was here and she was here, and that had to be enough. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I'm sorry, he whispered. For what? For making you hope. Before she could answer, shouts erupted from outside. Not angry shouts, panicked ones. Nahali was moving before Genevieve could process it, grabbing his rifle and pushing through the wiki-up's entrance. She followed her heart, hammering. The camp was in chaos. Warriors were mounting horses, women were gathering children, and everyone was pointing toward the canyon's eastern rim. Genevieve followed their gazes and felt her blood turn to ice. Riders. Dozens of them silhouetted against the rising sun. They carried rifles and torches, and even from this distance she could see the glint of metal badges, maybe, or Sheriff Briggs's silver spurs. Silver Creek had come for her. Etu appeared beside them, his face twisted with rage. You led them here, he snarled at Genevieve. You brought them straight to us. I didn't. I was careful. He laughed harsh and bitter. They probably followed your tracks, or maybe they've been watching our camp for weeks, waiting for an excuse. Congratulations, white girl. You just gave them one. Nahali stepped between them, his rifle raised. Back off, Etu, or what you'll shoot me your own blood. Etu shoved him hard. She's ruined you, made you weak, and now we're all going to pay for it. Etu, Nahali's mother appeared, her voice cracking like a whip. Gather the warriors, defensive positions only. No one fires unless fired upon. Defensive, Etu rounded on her. Mother, they've brought an army, and we will defend ourselves, but we won't be the ones who start this war. She looked at Genevieve, and for the first time there was something like pity in her eyes. You need to go out there, talk to them, tell them you're safe. They won't listen, Genevieve said. My father thinks I've been kidnapped. He thinks, then make him understand. Nahali's mother moved closer, her voice dropping. Because if those men ride into this camp with guns blazing, a lot of people are going to die, including you, including my son. Genevieve looked at Nahali. He was staring at the approaching riders, his knuckles white around his rifle, and she knew that he'd fight. That he'd die fighting if it came to that. Die protecting her, protecting his people, trying to bridge a gap that had never had a bridge to begin with. I'll go, she said. Genevieve, no. I'll go. She repeated, stronger this time. It's me they want. Maybe if I talk to them, if I explain, they'll drag you back to Silver Creek and lock you in a church until you marry Briggs. Nahali grabbed her arm. That's what your father wants. That's what he's always wanted. I know. She pulled free, gently rose on her toes, and kissed him one more time. It tasted like goodbye. But if I don't try, everyone here dies. Your mother, your sister, those children I saw. Her voice caught. I can't let that happen. She walked toward the canyon's edge before he could stop her, before she could change her mind. The rising sun painted everything gold and red, beautiful and terrible, and Genevieve thought about her mother's locket, about the willow tree, about the way Nahali said her name in the darkness. She thought about love and what it cost, and whether anything beautiful ever survived in a world built on hatred. The riders saw her. Someone shouted. The group wheeled toward her like a flock of predatory birds, and at their center she saw her father's silver hair, saw Colin Briggs's cold smile. She saw the future rushing toward her like a flood, and she couldn't tell if she was drowning or being saved. Her father reached her first. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped his face, a terrible mixture of relief and fury that made Genevieve's stomach twist. Behind him 24 men from Silver Creek spread out in a semicircle, their rifles catching the morning light like promises of violence. Genevieve, Mayor Harper's voice shook. Thank God. Are you hurt? Did they? I'm fine, Father. She held up her hands, trying to project calm she didn't feel. Nobody hurt me. I came here on my own. The relief on his face curdled into something darker. On your own. He repeated the words like they were foreign, incomprehensible. You rode into an Apache camp alone in the middle of the night, and you expect me to believe I came to warn them. The words came out stronger than she felt. I came to tell Nahali that you'd given orders to shoot him. I came to prevent bloodshed, not cause it. Colin Briggs rode forward, his jaw still tight from where she'd kneed him. There was a bruise forming on his cheekbone. Maybe he'd fallen when she'd bolted, or maybe he'd hit something in his anger. Either way, he looked at her with barely contained rage. You're defending them, he said flatly. After they've corrupted you, turned you against your own people, you're actually defending them. Nobody corrupted me. I made my own choices. You're 19 years old, her father snapped. You don't know what you're choosing. You think this is love. This is manipulation, Genevieve. These people are savages. They're using you to get to me, to undermine everything we've built. Behind her, Genevieve heard movement, the Apache warriors taking positions along the canyon rim, preparing for the fight they all knew was coming. She needed to defuse this before someone got trigger-happy, before one nervous man on either side turned this standoff into a massacre. Father, please listen to me. She took a step toward him, saw his hand twitch toward his rifle, and stopped. The fact that her own father saw her as a threat made something inside her chest crack. Nahali isn't using me. He's a good man. He's educated. He speaks 3 languages. He knows medicine. I don't care if he recites Shakespeare while performing surgery. Mayor Harper interrupted. He's Apache. That's all that matters. Why? The question burst out of her sharp with frustration. Why is that all that matters? Because he was born on the wrong side of an imaginary line, because his skin is darker than yours, because his ancestors were here first, and that's inconvenient for your railroad. Because they're killers. Colin moved his horse closer, his hand resting on his gun. Because they raid our settlements, murder our people, and you're so blinded by whatever spell he's cast on you that you can't see it. Your people murdered his cousin's wife last spring, Genevieve shot back. Prospectors shot her while she was gathering water, but I suppose that doesn't count, does it? When white men kill, it's self-defense. When Apache fight back, they're savages. The slap came so fast she didn't see it coming. Her father's hand connected with her cheek, and the sound cracked across the canyon like a gunshot. Her head snapped to the side, pain blooming hot and sharp, and for a moment everything went silent. Then chaos erupted, Nahali's voice roaring her name, the sound of rifles being cocked on both sides, shouts in English and Apache overlapping, escalating. Genevieve touched her burning cheek and tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. Her father looked at his hand like it belonged to someone else. Genevieve, you hit me. Her voice came out small, shocked. In 19 years, he'd never raised a hand to her, never even threatened it. She'd been yelled at, lectured, punished with silence or disappointment, but never this, never violence. You weren't listening. You never listen. But his face had gone pale and his hand was shaking. If you'd just come home quietly, if you'd just put on a white dress and married Colin and pretended to be happy. Genevieve laughed, and it sounded broken even to her own ears. Is that what Mother would have wanted, for me to suffocate in a life I didn't choose? Your mother understood duty. She understood sacrifice. My mother died young and angry, and you know it. Genevieve stepped back, widening the distance between them. She told me before the fever took her. She said she loved you, but she felt like a bird in a cage. She made me promise not to end up like her. Mayor Harper's face twisted with pain. Don't you dare use your mother against me. Then don't use duty against me. Genevieve's voice broke. I'm trying to tell you that there's another way, that we don't have to be enemies, that maybe there is no maybe. Colin's voice cut through hers, cold and final. Mayor Harper, we came here to retrieve your daughter and make it clear to these savages that they don't touch what belongs to Silver Creek. We've done the first part. Now let's do the second. He raised his rifle, pointing it toward the canyon where the Apache waited. Several men behind him did the same, their faces hard with the kind of righteousness that came from never questioning whether you might be wrong. No, Genevieve lunged forward, putting herself between the rifles and the camp. Colin, don't. Please, there are children down there, women, people who have nothing to do with... Move aside, Genevieve. I won't. Move aside or I'll move you myself. His finger settled on the trigger. Last warning. Sheriff Briggs. A new voice entered the fray, calm and authoritative. Genevieve turned and saw Nahali's mother standing at the canyon's edge, flanked by a dozen warriors. She held no weapon, but her presence commanded attention anyway. You want to start a war over a girl who came here willingly? That seems unwise. You kidnapped the mayor's daughter, Colin said. We did no such thing. Nahali's mother stepped forward, her movements deliberate and unthreatening. She rode into our camp this morning to warn my son that your men planned to kill him. We offered her protection. That's not kidnapping, that's hospitality. You're lying. Am I? She looked at Mayor Harper directly. Ask your daughter. Ask her if we harmed her. Ask her if we held her against her will. Ask her why she came. All eyes turned to Genevieve. She felt the weight of their expectations, their assumptions, their need for her to confirm whatever story they'd already decided was true. Her father wanted her to say she'd been seduced, corrupted, stolen. Colin wanted her to play the victim so he could play the hero. The townsmen wanted a reason to feel righteous about the violence they were itching to commit. She could give them what they wanted. She could lie, say she'd been confused, that Nahali had manipulated her, that she wanted to come home. It would be easy. It would save lives. It would destroy everything she believed in. They didn't hurt me, Genevieve said clearly. Nobody kidnapped me. I came here because I love Nahali, and I won't apologize for that. Her father made a sound like she'd stabbed him. Colin's face went hard as stone. And behind her from the canyon she heard Etu's voice rise in angry Apache, probably arguing that they should just kill everyone and be done with it. You're coming home. Mayor Harper's voice had gone flat, empty of everything except exhausted authority. Right now, whatever you think you feel for that Apache, it ends today. Colin, get her on a horse. Father, I said now. He turned to Nahali's mother. You have my daughter. Return her peacefully and we leave without incident. Refuse and we come down there and take her, your choice. Nahali's mother studied him for a long moment. Then she said something in Apache, sharp and commanding. The warriors behind her tensed, but none of them moved to stop Genevieve as Colin dismounted and grabbed her arm. Don't touch me, Genevieve hissed, trying to pull away. But his grip was iron bruising, and he dragged her toward his horse with the efficiency of someone who'd handled reluctant prisoners before. Stop fighting, he muttered in her ear. You're making this worse. Good. She dug her heels in, forcing him to half-carry her. I hope I make it impossible. I hope... Genevieve, Nahali's voice cut through everything else. She twisted in Colin's grip and saw him running toward them, his rifle forgotten, his face desperate. He too was right behind him shouting, and Nahali's mother was calling for them to stop. But Nahali wasn't listening. He wasn't listening to anyone except whatever voice in his head was screaming that he couldn't let her go. Let her go, Nahali demanded, breathing hard. He was close enough now that Genevieve could see the fear in his eyes, the helpless rage. She doesn't want to leave. You heard her. What she wants stopped mattering when she became a danger to herself. Colin's hand moved to his gun. Step back, Apache. This is your last warning. Nahali, please. Genevieve found her voice. Please just go back. Don't. I'm not letting them take you. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the moment he made his decision, the moment he chose love over survival, her over safety, truth over the careful balance he'd been maintaining between two worlds. He reached for her hand. Colin shot him. The sound was deafening. Birds exploded from the canyon walls. Someone screamed, maybe Genevieve, maybe Nahali's mother, maybe the universe itself protesting the wrongness of it. Nahali staggered backward, his hand pressed to his shoulder where blood was already blooming through his fingers. Then everything became noise and chaos and violence. The Apache warriors opened fire. The Silver Creek men returned it. Bullets whined through the air like angry hornets, and Genevieve was on the ground. Colin had tackled her, was covering her body with his own while hell erupted around them. She could hear her father shouting orders, could hear Tu's war cry, could hear horses screaming in terror. Stay down, Colin commanded, his weight crushing the air from her lungs. Just stay down. But she couldn't see Nahali. She couldn't see if he was alive or dead, couldn't see if that bullet had killed him or just wounded him, couldn't see anything except dust and gun smoke and the boots of men running past them toward the canyon. Nahali! She screamed his name, thrashing under Colin's grip. Nahali! A hand grabbed her ankle. She looked down and saw him. Nahali on his stomach, bleeding, pulling himself toward her with his good arm. His face was twisted with pain, but his eyes were clear, focused entirely on her. Run! He gasped. Genevieve, run! I'm not leaving you. Run! He pushed her away with the last of his strength toward the rocks, toward cover, toward anything that wasn't the middle of a battlefield. Please, run! Colin was distracted, returning fire toward the canyon. Her father was mounted again, trying to rally his men. Nobody was looking at her. Nobody except Nahali, whose blood was staining the desert red, who was begging her with his eyes to save herself. She ran. Not away from him, she could never run away from him. She ran toward the canyon, toward the Apache camp, sliding and stumbling down the slope while bullets sang past her head. A warrior grabbed her as she reached the bottom, yanking her behind a boulder, and she recognized him, one of the men who'd pointed arrows at her this morning, a lifetime ago. Stay here, he commanded. Then was gone, moving toward the fight with fluid grace. Genevieve pressed herself against the rock and tried to breathe, tried to think, tried to figure out how everything had fallen apart so fast. One moment she'd been talking, trying to make peace, and the next, this is your fault. She turned and found Itu crouched beside her, his face splattered with blood. Someone else's blood, she hoped. His eyes were wild, burning with the kind of rage that could level cities. You brought them here, you made my cousin weak, and now, his voice cracked. Now we're at war, the war we've been trying to avoid for years, all because he couldn't resist a pretty white face. I didn't want this, Genevieve whispered. I never wanted what you wanted doesn't matter. He loaded his rifle with sharp, angry movements. What matters is what you did, and what you did was bring death to our doorstep. He was right. God help her, he was right. She'd thought love was enough, thought good intentions could bridge centuries of hatred and violence, thought her and Nahali's story could somehow be different from all the tragic stories that came before. She'd been wrong. Above them, the gunfire was slowing. Either the men from Silver Creek were retreating, or they were dead. Genevieve couldn't tell which, couldn't see anything from her position behind the boulder. All she could do was wait and pray and hate herself for every choice that had led to this moment. "Cease fire!" The voice came from above, her father's voice, rough with smoke and fear. "Apache, cease fire, we're withdrawing." The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. In silence you could hear the screaming, the wounded calling for help, the horses that had been hit, the soft crying of children who'd hidden during the battle, but now emerged to find their world transformed by violence. Itu was the first to move. He scaled the boulder like a cat, his rifle ready, scanning for threats. Then he swore in Apache, long and vicious, and Genevieve knew something terrible had happened. She climbed up after him. The canyon rim was a horror show, bodies on both sides, some moving and some not. Her father was still mounted, his arm bleeding, his face gray with shock. The Silver Creek men who'd survived were gathering their wounded, loading them onto horses with the jerky efficiency of people in shock. And there, in the center of it all, was Nahali. He was on his knees, his good hand pressed to his shoulder, his face pale with blood loss. Colin Briggs stood behind him with a gun to his head. "Don't!" Colin called out as Apache warriors began moving toward them. "Don't come any closer or I blow his brains out right here." Genevieve's heart stopped. "Colin, no, please, you can't I?" He looked at her and his face was empty of everything except cold purpose. "You chose him over me, over your family, over your own people. Fine, but he's coming back to Silver Creek with us, and he's going to hang for what he's done." "He hasn't done anything." Genevieve scrambled up the slope, ignoring Itu's hissed warning. "Colin, he was defending himself. You shot him first. Everyone saw him reach for the mayor's daughter." Colin pressed the gun harder against Nahali's skull. "That's assault. That's attempted kidnapping. That's enough to hang him 3 times over." "It's a lie. It's the law." He smiled, thin and cruel. "Your father's already agreed. Haven't you, Mayor Harper?" Her father wouldn't meet her eyes. "The law is the law, Genevieve. The law is whatever you make it." She was screaming now, didn't care who heard. "You're going to murder him because I loved him, because he made me happy, because he showed me that there's more to life than your plans and your railroad and your empire built on stolen land." "Watch your mouth, girl." Colin's voice dropped to a growl. "You're still coming back to Silver Creek, and you're still marrying me, but maybe now you'll understand that there are consequences to defiance." "I'll never marry you." The words came out calm, certain despite the terror choking her. "I'd rather die. That can be arranged." His finger tightened on the trigger. "But first, you're going to watch him die. You're going to see what happens to savages who touch what belongs to civilized men." "No." Nahali spoke for the first time, his voice hoarse but steady. "Don't hurt her, please. Whatever you're going to do to me, just don't hurt her." "How noble," Colin laughed. "The savages got manners. Guess that makes everything okay, right? Guess that makes up for the 3 good men you people killed today. You brought an army to our camp." He too snarled from behind Genevieve. He'd moved up beside her, his rifle trained on Colin with deadly precision. "What did you expect? Flowers and apologies? I expected you to know your place." "And where is that?" Itu's voice was silk over steel. "In the ground, in chains, wiped from history so you can sleep better at night. If that's what it takes." Colin shrugged. "Now drop your weapon or I drop him." For a moment, nothing moved. The world balanced on the edge of a knife, waiting to see which way it would fall. Genevieve could see the calculation in Itu's eyes, weighing Nahali's life against principle, against pride, against the rage that had been building in him for years. "Itu." Nahali's mother appeared at the canyon's edge, flanked by elders. Her face was carved from stone, but her eyes were pleading. "Put down the rifle. Mother, put it down." She moved forward slowly, her hands visible, her movements non-threatening. "Sheriff Briggs, I propose an exchange." Colin's eyes narrowed. "I'm listening. You take my son, you take the girl, you go back to Silver Creek. but you give us until the next moon to leave this camp. We'll move further into the mountains, away from your railroad, away from your town. We'll disappear." "Mother, no." Nahali tried to stand, and Colin struck him with the gun barrel. He went down hard, blood streaming from a new cut above his eye. Genevieve lunged forward instinctively, but Itu caught her arm, holding her back with bruising force. "Don't," he hissed in her ear. "You'll just give them another hostage." "You have no authority to make that promise," Mayor Harper said, finding his voice again. He looked old, suddenly ancient, worn down by the violence he'd unleashed. The treaty is dead," Nahali's mother said it flatly without emotion. "We both know it. This fight today just made it official. So I'm offering you a way to avoid total war. Take your prisoners, take your victory, and let us gather our people and go." "How do I know you'll keep your word? Because I don't want to watch any more children die today." She looked at the bodies scattered across the canyon rim, both Apache and white, both young and old. "Do you?" The question hung in the air. Mayor Harper looked at his bleeding arm, at his daughter's face, at the man he'd brought with him who were loading corpses onto horses. He looked at the Apache camp below, where women were tending wounded warriors and smoke rose from damaged wickiups. He looked at what his vision of progress had cost. "You have until the next moon," he said finally. "After that, this land belongs to the railroad. Anyone who remains will be removed by force." "Agreed." Nahali's mother's face showed no relief, no gratitude, just weary acceptance. Take them both, and don't come back." Colin hauled Nahali to his feet, keeping the gun pressed against his spine. Another man, Deputy Morrison Genevieve recognized numbly, grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the horses. She fought, screaming Nahali's name, but the deputy was stronger, and her father was there, helping load her onto a horse like she was cargo instead of his daughter. "I'll never forgive you for this," she told him. "Never." "I know," Mayor Harper said quietly. He looked 100 years old. "But you'll live. That's what matters." They rode out as the sun climbed higher, painting the desert in shades of gold that seemed obscene given what had just happened. Genevieve twisted in the saddle, watching the Apache camp disappear behind them. The last thing she saw was Nahali's mother standing at the canyon's edge, her hand raised in a gesture that might have been farewell, or benediction, or curse. Nahali rode behind Colin, slumped forward, leaving a trail of blood drops in the dust. Genevieve tried to catch his eye, tried to tell him without words that this wasn't over, that she'd find a way, that love didn't end just because men with guns said it had to. But he wouldn't look at her, maybe couldn't. Maybe the pain was too much, or the shame, or the knowledge that he'd brought disaster to his people for the sake of a girl who couldn't save him. They reached Silver Creek by midday. The town came out to watch them ride. In the mayor's daughter returned the Apache warrior, captured justice served in blood and bullets. People cheered. Women clutched their children and thanked God. Men raised their hats and their rifles and their voices in celebration. Genevieve saw Martha in the crowd, her face streaked with tears. She saw Mrs. Patterson from the Mercantile clapping like she was at a parade. She saw the pastor from the church her mother used to attend, nodding approval at this demonstration of righteous violence. She saw her town, and she hated every inch of it. Colin hauled Nahali off his horse and dragged him toward the jail. The crowd followed, hungry for more, hungry to see the savage locked up like the animal they believed he was. Genevieve tried to dismount, tried to follow, but her father's hand clamped down on her shoulder. "You're going home," he said. "And you're staying there until you learn to act like a civilized woman." "Civilization," Genevieve spat. "Is that what we're calling this?" He didn't answer, just led her horse toward their house, while behind them the crowd's cheers turned to jeers and calls for blood. Someone started chanting, "Hang him." Others picked it up. Soon the entire town was screaming for Nahali's death, and Genevieve understood with terrible clarity that her father had no intention of stopping them. Nahali was going to die, and she was going to be locked in her room, helpless to prevent it. unless she found a way to stop being helpless. The lock clicked into place, with the finality of a coffin closing. Genevieve stood in her room, the same room she'd escaped from last night, a lifetime ago, and listened to her father's footsteps retreat down the hallway. Heavy, tired, the footsteps of a man who'd won a battle but lost something he couldn't name. She didn't go to the window, didn't scream or pound on the door or dissolve into the tears that burned behind her eyes. Instead, she stood perfectly still in the center of the room and let the rage build inside her like a fever, like a fire, like something that could either destroy her or forge her into something harder than her father had ever imagined. Outside, the mob was still chanting. She could hear them even through the walls, through the glass, through the careful distance her father had built between his daughter and the ugliness of the world. Hang him, hang him, hang him. The words rolled through Silver Creek like thunder, and Genevieve understood that this was what her father had built. Not civilization, not progress, just hatred dressed up in Sunday clothes and called righteous. She moved to her wardrobe with mechanical precision. Her riding clothes were ruined, torn, and blood-stained from the canyon. She stripped them off and changed into something simpler, darker, less conspicuous. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She'd thought they'd shake, thought the terror would make her clumsy, but instead she felt carved from ice, crystallized into purpose. Nahali was in the jail. They wanted to hang him, and she had maybe hours, maybe less, to figure out how to stop them. The window opened soundlessly. She'd expected her father to nail it shut, to take away even that small freedom, but maybe he thought one night had taught her the futility of running. Maybe he thought the lock on her door was enough. Maybe he'd underestimated her the same way he'd underestimated everything that didn't fit his narrow vision of how the world should work. The trellis held her weight. The roses didn't catch this time, or maybe she just didn't care about the thorns anymore. Her boots hit the ground softly, and then she was running not toward the jail, not yet. That would be suicide. Colin would have guards posted, and the mob would recognize her in an instant. She needed help. She needed an ally in a town that had proven it had none. She needed Margaret. The housekeeper's cottage sat behind the main house, a small structure that her father had built when Margaret first came to work for them 15 years ago. Genevieve had spent countless afternoons there as a child, learning to bake bread and can preserves and do all the practical things her mother had been too frail to teach her. Margaret had been more family than servant, more friend than employee. And last night, Margaret had seen everything. Genevieve didn't knock. She pushed through the door and found Margaret sitting at her small table with a cup of tea gone cold, her face buried in her hands. She looked up when Genevieve entered, and her expression cycled through shock, fear, and something that might have been relief. "Miss Genevieve," her voice cracked. "Lord above child, what are you doing here? Your father said—" "My father locked me in my room like I'm a prisoner in my own house." Genevieve closed the door behind her, checking to make sure no one had followed. "Margaret, I need your help." "I can't." Margaret stood wringing her hands in that anxious way she had. "You don't know what's happening out there. The town, they want blood. They're calling for a hanging tonight, right now. The sheriff's trying to talk them into waiting for a proper trial, but there won't be a trial." Genevieve moved closer, keeping her voice low and urgent. "Colin will make sure of that. He wants Nahali dead, and he wants me to watch. He wants to teach me a lesson about what happens when I step out of line. Then maybe you should learn it." Margaret's face was pale, frightened. "Miss Genevieve, I love you like you were my own. You know I do. But this is beyond what love can fix. That Apache boy is going to die, and if you try to stop it, you'll die too. Is that what your mother would have wanted? My mother would have wanted me to fight for what's right." Genevieve grabbed Margaret's hand, squeezing tight. "She would have wanted me to be brave. You said it yourself last night, love matters. Well, I'm choosing to believe that. I'm choosing to believe that one person can make a difference even when the whole world says they can't." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm going to save him, Either way, I have to try." Genevieve took a shaky breath. "Margaret, please, I need you to get word to the Apache camp, to Nahali's mother. Tell her what's happening. Tell her," her voice caught. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I'm going to do everything I can, but if I fail, maybe she can what? Attack the town, start a war." Margaret shook her head. "That boy told his people to stay away. Deputy Morrison was bragging about it at the general store. Said the Apache won't come for him because he made them promise to leave peacefully. Said he chose his people over his own life." The words hit Genevieve like a physical blow. Of course Nahali had done that. Of course he'd sacrificed himself to save his people from further violence. That was who he was, the man who'd bandaged her ankle 3 years ago, instead of leaving her on that cliff. The man who'd taught her about honor and sacrifice and love that asked for nothing in return. The man she was going to save, even if it killed her. "Then I'll do it alone," Genevieve said. "But I need information. The jail, how many guards? Is Colin? There is my father." "Miss Genevieve, Margaret, please." She was begging now, and she didn't care. "Please, I can't let him die. I can't live in a world where loving someone is a crime punishable by death. If that makes me a traitor to Silver Creek, then fine, I'm a traitor, but I won't be a coward." Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed deep and resigned, and Genevieve knew she'd won. "There are 2 guards at the jail. The sheriff's at the town hall trying to calm the mob. Your father's at the church with Pastor Williams probably praying for guidance he won't follow." She moved to her cupboard and pulled out a heavy iron key. "This is the spare key to the jail. I'm supposed to clean there once a week, and the sheriff gave it to me years ago. But Miss Genevieve, even if you get him out, where will you go? How will you?" "I don't know." Genevieve took the key, its weight solid and real in her palm. "But I'll figure it out. I have to." She kissed Margaret's weathered cheek, then slipped back into the evening. The sun was setting now, painting Silver Creek in shades of blood and fire. Appropriate, Genevieve thought bitterly. The town had shown its true colors today, and they were exactly as ugly as she'd feared. The jail sat on the edge of town, a squat stone building that had been built to hold drunks and petty thieves, not political prisoners. 2 guards stood outside, just as Margaret had said. Genevieve recognized them, Sam Tucker and his younger brother James, both farm boys who'd joined the sheriff's auxiliary last year for the steady pay. They weren't bad men exactly, just young and stupid and convinced that following orders was the same thing as doing right. She couldn't go through the front. That was suicide. But the jail had a back entrance. She'd seen it 100 times walking past with her father when he'd needed to speak with prisoners or conduct official business. If she could get to that door, if the guards were distracted enough, a bottle shattered somewhere in the distance, followed by raucous laughter. The mob was getting drunk, working themselves up for the violence they'd been promised. Genevieve used the noise as cover, slipping through the shadows between buildings, keeping low and moving fast. The back door was locked, but Margaret's key turned smoothly. Genevieve eased it open, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The jail's interior was dim, lit only by a single lantern hanging near the cells. The air smelled like sweat and blood and despair. "Nahali," she whispered his name into the darkness. "Nahali, where are you?" "Genevieve." His voice came from the far cell, rough with pain and disbelief. No, you can't be here. I don't care what they'll do." She fumbled with the keys, trying to find the right one for the cell. There were 6 on the ring, and her hands were shaking now, adrenaline making her clumsy. "I'm getting you out. We're leaving. Right now, before what?" Colin Briggs stepped out of the shadows near the front door, his gun already drawn. "Before you make everything worse than it already is." Genevieve's blood turned to ice. She'd been so careful, so quiet. How had he known? How had he? "Margaret came to me 20 minutes ago," Colin said, answering her unspoken question. He moved closer, the lantern light catching the cruel satisfaction on his face. "Told me you'd threatened her." Said you were planning something desperate. I've been waiting here hoping she was wrong, hoping you'd finally learned your lesson. Margaret wouldn't, but even as Genevieve said it, she knew it was true. Margaret had always been her father's creature, first loyal to the family rather than to her. She'd helped tonight because she'd had no choice, but she'd also made sure that help would be futile. Genevieve felt something inside her chest crack. Not breaking would have been merciful. This was worse. This was understanding that she was truly alone, that everyone she'd ever trusted had chosen fear over love, safety over truth. Put down the keys, Colin ordered. Nice and slow. No. The word came out steady, certain. You'll have to shoot me to stop me, Colin, and somehow I don't think my father would appreciate you killing his only daughter. Your father would appreciate me stopping you from destroying yourself. Colin's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance, Genevieve. Put down the keys and step away from the cell. Behind her, Nahali spoke. Do it. Genevieve, please. Just do what he says. No. She found the right key, slid it into the lock. I'm not leaving you. You have to. Nahali's voice was raw, desperate. This isn't just about me anymore. If you help me escape, they'll charge you as an accomplice. You'll hang beside me. Is that what you want? I want to be with you. The lock clicked open. She pulled the cell door wide and finally saw him. Nahali slumped against the wall, his shoulder wrapped in bloody bandages, his face bruised and swollen from whatever treatment he'd received after they'd dragged him here. He looked half dead already, but his eyes were alive, burning with the same fierce determination she felt coursing through her veins. Then be with me, by living, he said softly, by surviving, by remembering that love doesn't always mean dying together. Sometimes it means one person sacrificing so the other can be free. That's very touching, Colin interrupted, but I'm afraid neither of you is leaving this jail. Guards! Sam Tucker burst through the front door, his rifle raised. He looked between Colin, Genevieve, and the open cell with wide, confused eyes. Sheriff, what's happening? Miss Harper was attempting to help the prisoner escape. Colin's voice was smooth, official. Secure her, use force if necessary. Sam hesitated. He'd known Genevieve her entire life, had probably been sweet on her when they were younger, but orders were orders, and fear was stronger than nostalgia. He moved toward her, reaching for her arm. Nahali moved faster. Even injured, even half dead from blood loss and pain, he was quicker than any of them. He lunged from the cell, grabbing Sam's rifle and spinning it around in one fluid motion. The young guard stumbled backward, startled, and Nahali had the weapon trained on Colin before anyone could blink. Drop your gun, Nahali said quietly, or I drop you. Colin laughed, actually laughed. You won't shoot me. You're too civilized for that, remember? Too educated, too much of a good Apache. Try me. Nahali's finger settled on the trigger. I've already lost everything. My people, my honor. The woman I love is about to be arrested because of me. What exactly do I have to lose by putting a bullet between your eyes? For the first time since Genevieve had known him, Colin Briggs looked uncertain. The cocky confidence drained from his face, replaced by the dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, he'd pushed too far, that maybe threatening to hang a man and imprison the woman he loved was the kind of thing that made even peaceful people violent. Nahali, don't. Genevieve touched his arm gently. Please. If you kill him, they'll hunt you forever. There won't be anywhere in the world you can hide. Then I'll die knowing I stopped him from hurting you. Nahali didn't take his eyes off Colin. That seems like a fair trade. It's not. She moved between them, blocking his line of fire. It's not fair, and it's not right, and it's not what your mother would want. She sacrificed to give your people time to escape. Don't waste that by becoming the monster they claim you are. He shot me. Nahali's voice cracked. He dragged you back here. He was going to hang me and make you watch. And you want me to just walk away. I want you to live. Genevieve cupped his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. I want you to be the man I fell in love with, the one who bandaged my ankle instead of leaving me to die. the one who taught me about honor and mercy and choosing love over hatred. Love hasn't gotten us very far. It got us here, together, still fighting. She smiled, though tears were streaming down her face. That's further than most people get. That's more than most people have the courage to reach for. Behind them, the jail door burst open. Mayor Harper entered with half a dozen armed men. Their rifles raised their faces hard with righteous anger. They took in the scene: Nahali holding Sam's rifle, Genevieve standing between him and Colin, the open cell door. "Put down the weapon," Mayor Harper commanded. His voice was steady, but Genevieve could see the fear in his eyes. Fear that he was about to watch his daughter die. Fear that everything he'd built was crumbling. "Nahali, please, don't make this worse." "Worse?" Nahali laughed, harsh and broken. "How could this possibly be worse? You've destroyed my people's home, killed our warriors, imprisoned me for the crime of loving your daughter. What's left to lose? Her life." Mayor Harper gestured at Genevieve. "If you shoot Sheriff Briggs, these men will kill you. And they'll kill her too, because she'll try to stop them. Is that what you want, her blood on your hands?" The rifle wavered. Genevieve felt Nahali's resolve cracking, felt the weight of impossible choices crushing down on both of them. There was no right answer here, no clever solution, just pain and sacrifice and the terrible math of survival. "I'll make you a deal," Mayor Harper said into the silence. "Put down the gun, let us take you back to the cell, and I'll guarantee your safety until we can arrange a proper trial." "Your guarantees aren't worth much," Nahali said flatly. "Maybe not, but they're all I have to offer." Mayor Harper looked at his daughter, and for the first time in her life, Genevieve saw him as something other than the mayor, the patriarch, the man who always had answers. She saw him as just a father, terrified and confused, and trying desperately to save his child from a situation he'd helped create. "Please, I don't want to watch her die." "Then let us go." Genevieve spoke before Nahali could. "Both of us. Right now. Give us horses and supplies and a head start, and we'll disappear. You'll never see either of us again." "You know I can't do that." "Why not?" Her voice rose sharp with desperation. "What's more important, father, your pride, your railroad, your vision of civilization, or your daughter's life?" "All of it." He said it quietly, sadly. "It's all connected, Genevieve. I let you go with him. The town sees weakness. They see their mayor unable to control his own family. They lose faith. And when they lose faith, everything falls apart. The railroad deal collapses. The treaties we've negotiated crumble. The peace we've built. There is no peace." Genevieve screamed it all, her rage and fear and heartbreak exploding outward. "There's never been peace. There's just oppression and violence and people like you pretending it's all for the greater good." The jail went silent. Even the mob outside seemed to quiet, as if the whole town was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Mayor Harper's face had gone gray. "You really believe that? You really think everything I've done, everything I've built is evil?" "I think you've built a beautiful prison," Genevieve said more quietly, "and you've called it paradise. But it's still a prison, father, for me, for the Apache, for everyone who doesn't fit your perfect vision." "Then what would you have me do?" His voice broke. "Tell me, Genevieve, how do I fix this? How do I give you what you want without destroying everything else?" She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, a sound cut through the night, a sound that made everyone in that jail freeze in recognition and dread. War drums, coming from the canyon, coming closer. "No," Nahali whispered. "Etu, what did you do?" The answer came in the form of an arrow crashing through the jail's window and embedding itself in the far wall. Tied to its shaft was a strip of white cloth, and written on that cloth in charcoal were words in English: "Return our brother or burn." Mayor Harper stared at the arrow like it was a snake. "I gave them until the next moon. We had an agreement." "Agreements end when someone breaks their word," a new voice said from the doorway. Genevieve turned and saw him, Itu, flanked by a dozen Apache warriors, all armed, all painted for war. He looked at Nahali with something like disappointment. You promised to take care of yourself, to survive. Did you really think we'd let them hang you? Mother agreed. Nahali started. Mother is old. She's forgotten what it means to fight. Etu stepped into the jail, ignoring the rifles pointed at him. But I haven't, and neither have our warriors. We're done running. We're done negotiating. We're done pretending there's a peaceful solution to people who want us dead. He looked at Mayor Harper with cold fury. You have one chance. Give us Nahali, right now, or we burn Silver Creek to the ground, starting with this jail. The mayor's men tightened their grips on their rifles. Colin recovered his gun from where he'd dropped it, aiming it at Etu's chest. Sam Tucker moved to a defensive position. Every man in that room was ready to die, ready to kill, ready to start a war that would paint the desert red for generations. Genevieve looked at Nahali, at her father, at Etu, at all these men, good men in their own ways, preparing to murder each other over pride and principle and wounds too deep to heal. And she made a choice. She walked to the center of the jail, positioning herself exactly between both groups. If they wanted to fight, they'd have to shoot through her first. No more, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but somehow it cut through all the tension, all the anger. No more killing, no more sacrifices, no more choosing between love and survival. Genevieve, move, her father commanded. No. She looked at him, then at Etu, then at every man in that room. You want to fight, fine. Kill me first. Let my blood be the price of your righteousness. Let my death be the thing you have to explain to your children when they ask why the war started. Miss Harper, Colin began, but she cut him off. I'm done being quiet. I'm done being obedient. I'm done pretending that any of this makes sense. She gestured at the rifles, the arrows, the hatred crystallized into violence. You're going to start a war over what, love? The fact that two people from different worlds fell for each other. You're willing to kill for that. It's not that simple, Mayor Harper said. It is exactly that simple. Genevieve turned to Etu. Your cousin loves me. I love him. That's the truth. Everything else, the politics, the land disputes, the history, that's all real, but it's not this moment, this choice. Right now you can choose to save him or damn him, which matters more. Etu's expression flickered, just for a moment, just long enough for Genevieve to see the boy underneath the warrior, the cousin who'd grown up with Nahali, who'd shared hunts and stories and dreams of a future that didn't involve quite so much bloodshed. You don't understand what you're asking, Etu said finally. If we back down now, we lose everything. If you fight now, you lose everything, Genevieve countered. But your people are supposed to be moving camps, getting to safety. How many of them will die if you start a war tonight? How many children? She's right. Nahali's voice was quiet but firm. He'd lowered the rifle, holding it loose at his side. Etu, brother, I know you want to fight. I know you're angry. But this isn't the way. Not like this. Not over me. Then over what? Etu's voice cracked. When do we stop retreating? When do we stop letting them take and take and take until there's nothing left? I don't know. Nahali met his cousin's eyes. But I know that if you attack this town tonight, they'll send the army. And then it won't be a fight. It'll be a massacre. Is that what you want? To be remembered as the man who led our people to extinction. Silence fell over the jail, thick and suffocating. Outside, the war drums had stopped. Maybe the warriors were waiting for Etu's signal. Maybe they were preparing for the attack. Maybe they were as torn as everyone in this room, caught between rage and reason, between what felt right and what actually was. Etu looked at the floor, at the ceiling, at anywhere except the faces watching him, waiting for him to choose between honor and survival. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. If we let them keep him, they'll hang him. Not if I have anything to say about it, a voice called from outside. Everyone turned as Pastor Williams pushed through the crowd of warriors, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. He looked ridiculous, a thin, bookish man in his Sunday clothes, interrupting a standoff with nothing but faith and stubbornness. I've been listening to this mob all evening, hearing what they want, and I'm here to tell you, as the spiritual leader of this community, that we will not hang an innocent man. He's Apache, Colin snarled. He's not innocent. He's human. That makes him innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Pastor Williams turned to Mayor Harper. Thomas, you know I'm right. You know this isn't justice, it's revenge. And revenge isn't what your wife would have wanted. It's not what God wants. And it's sure not what this town needs. Mayor Harper looked at the pastor, at his daughter, at the powder keg of violence surrounding them. Genevieve could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to find a solution that didn't end in disaster. Finally, he lowered his rifle. "Stand down," he ordered his men. Then to E2, "You can have him. But if you or your people come near Silver Creek again, if we see even one Apache warrior on our land, we won't hesitate. There won't be any more negotiations, no more treaties, just war. Understand?" E2 stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded, once sharp and final. "Understood." Nahali moved toward his cousin, but his eyes stayed on Genevieve. In them she saw everything they couldn't say. Goodbye, I love you, I'm sorry, thank you, forgive me. All the words that mattered and none that would change anything. "Wait," she said. "Just wait." She closed the distance between them in 3 steps and kissed him. Right there in front of everyone. In front of her father and Colin and Etu and the warriors and the pastor and God himself. She kissed him like it was the last kiss in the world, like she could pour everything she felt into this one moment, like love was a language that transcended all the hatred trying to tear them apart. When she pulled back, Nahali was crying. So was she. "Go," she whispered. "Live for both of us. Genevieve, go." He went. A2 and the warriors surrounded him, protecting him, pulling him toward the door, and the horses beyond, and the safety of distance. Genevieve watched him disappear into the night, watched the shape of him fade into shadows, until she couldn't tell where he ended and the darkness began. Her father's hand settled on her shoulder, gentle despite everything. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know you don't believe that, but I am." Genevieve didn't answer. She was too busy memorizing the sound of hoofbeats, the drum of horses carrying Nahali away from her, carrying him toward survival and leaving her alone in a town that had never understood what they'd had, what they'd been willing to fight for. The crowd outside was dispersing, disappointed that their entertainment had been canceled. Colin was arguing with Pastor Williams about law and order and divine justice. Sam Tucker was locking the now empty cell. And Genevieve stood in the center of it all, her lips still burning with the memory of that last kiss, and wondered if love was always supposed to hurt this much. Or if maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the pause before the final chapter. 3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands, impossible to hold, leaving only the memory of weight. Genevieve spent them in a kind of waking sleep, moving through the rituals of her father's house like a ghost haunting her own life. She took meals in silence. She ignored Colin's visits. She stared out her window at the willow tree and wondered if Nahali ever thought about her, or if survival had forced him to forget. Her father tried in his clumsy way to rebuild what had broken between them. He brought her books she didn't read, spoke to her in gentle tones she didn't acknowledge, promised her that time would heal everything. But time wasn't a healer. It was just distance, stretching the moment of that last kiss further and further into the past, until Genevieve could barely remember what Nahali's lips had tasted like. She was forgetting him. That terrified her more than anything. On the 23rd day, Margaret came to her room with breakfast and news. "There's talk in town," she said carefully, setting the tray down, "about the Apache. They've moved north deeper into the mountains. Some folks are saying they'll never come back, that they're gone for good." Genevieve's hands stilled on her teacup. Gone. Safe, though. That's what matters, isn't it? Margaret's voice was gentle, apologetic. She'd tried to explain herself a dozen times, how she'd gone to Colin not to betray Genevieve, but to protect her, how she'd thought the sheriff would just increase the guard, not lie in wait. Genevieve had listened to all of it without speaking, without forgiving, without quite hating her either. Betrayal was such a complicated thing when it came wrapped in love. Safe, Genevieve repeated. The word felt foreign in her mouth. Is that really what matters? Being safe but apart, surviving but not living? Margaret sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. I don't know, child. I used to think I understood the world, thought I knew the difference between right and wrong, between proper and improper, but watching you these past weeks, her voice caught. You look like you're dying, slowly, and I can't help but think that maybe being safe isn't always the same as being saved. Before Genevieve could respond, shouts erupted from downstairs. Not angry shouts this time, excited ones, urgent with news. Margaret hurried to the window, pulling back the curtain, and gasped, Good Lord, Miss Genevieve, you need to see this. Genevieve joined her at the window and felt her heart stop. The town square was filling with people, all pointing toward the northern road, and on that road, moving toward Silver Creek like a slow tide, was a procession of wagons and horses and people on foot. Apache people. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, led by a woman with silver hair who sat her horse like a queen surveying her kingdom, Nahali's mother, and beside her, No, Genevieve whispered, That's impossible. But it wasn't impossible, it was real. Nahali rode beside his mother, his shoulders still bandaged but his back straight, his face set with determination. And behind them came the entire camp, men, women, children, elders, everyone who'd survived the canyon battle, everyone who'd been forced to flee. They were coming back. Genevieve was down the stairs before she'd consciously decided to move, ignoring Margaret's calls, ignoring her father's voice from his study, demanding to know what was happening. She burst through the front door and into chaos. The town was mobilizing, men grabbing rifles, women pulling children inside shops, slamming shutters closed. They thought this was an attack. They thought the Apache had come for revenge. She had to stop them, had to make them understand. Wait! Genevieve ran toward the square, her skirts tangling around her legs. Don't shoot! They're not attacking! Colin appeared from the sheriff's office, his rifle already raised. Get back inside, Genevieve. This is official business. Official business? They're not armed. She gestured at the approaching procession. Look at them. They have children with them, elders. This isn't a war party. Then what is it? Mayor Harper had emerged from somewhere, flanked by his council members. His face was pale but composed, his mayor's mask firmly in place, despite the fear Genevieve could see in his eyes. The procession reached the town's edge and stopped. Nahali's mother dismounted with fluid grace despite her age and walked forward alone. She carried no weapons. Her hands were visible empty except for a rolled piece of paper tied with leather cord. She stopped 10 feet from where Mayor Harper stood and held up the document. We've come to negotiate, she said clearly. Not to fight, not to raid, to negotiate. We had an agreement, Mayor Harper replied. You were supposed to leave, move north, stay away from Silver Creek. And we did. For 3 weeks we lived in the mountains, no water, little game, children getting sick from the cold. Her voice remained steady, but Genevieve heard the steel underneath. You said we had until the next moon. Well, the moon came and went, and we realized something running away doesn't solve anything. It just delays the inevitable. So you came back to fight. We came back to propose a solution. She held out the document. This is a treaty, written by our elders and approved by our council. It outlines how we can share this land, where we'll hunt, where you'll build. Sacred spaces that remain untouched. Boundaries that both sides respect. It's fair, it's practical, and it's our last offer. Mayor Harper took the document but didn't unroll it. And if we refuse, then we fight. But this time, we won't run." Nahali's mother looked past him directly at Genevieve, and something passed between them, an understanding maybe, or a recognition. "And I don't think anyone here really wants more blood. I think we're all tired of burying our dead." Colin stepped forward, his rifle still raised. "You can't just walk into our town and demand negotiations. That's not how this works." "Then how does it work, Sheriff?" E2 emerged from the crowd of Apache, his expression hard, but his hands carefully visible and empty. "You take our land piece by piece until there's nothing left. You push us into smaller and smaller corners until we starve or die of disease. And then you tell your children that the Apache just faded away like we were never real to begin with. That's not—" Colin started, but E2 cut him off. "That's exactly what you're doing, and you know it." He looked at Mayor Harper. "My cousin risked his life for your daughter, not because he was stupid or naive, but because he believed love could be stronger than hatred. Well, here we are. Prove him right or prove him wrong, but do it now. We're done waiting." Genevieve felt Nahali's eyes on her before she saw him. She turned, and there he was, closer now, having dismounted, and moved through the crowd with that quiet grace she'd fallen in love with. He looked thinner, tired, but alive. So wonderfully, impossibly alive. "Genevieve." He said her name like a prayer, like a question, like he wasn't sure she was real. I couldn't stay away. I tried. I told myself you were safer without me, that I should just let you go, but—" She kissed him, right there in the town square, in front of everyone, for the second time in 3 weeks, and this time she didn't care who was watching, or what they thought, or what it meant for politics, or treaties, or her father's carefully constructed world. This time she kissed him because she wanted to, because she needed to, because love wasn't something to be ashamed of, or hidden away, or sacrificed for other people's comfort. When they broke apart, the square was silent. Every person, Apache and white, young and old, was staring at them with expressions ranging from shock to disgust to something that might have been hope. "I love him," Genevieve announced to the crowd. Her voice rang clear across the square. "I love Nahali, and I'm not sorry. I am not ashamed, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise to make any of you more comfortable." "Genevieve," her father began, but she turned on him with all the fury she'd been holding back for 3 weeks. "No, you don't get to talk. Not yet." She moved to stand beside Nahali, taking his hand in hers. "You want to know why I fell in love with him? Because he sees me as a person, not property. Because he listens instead of commanding. Because he taught me that strength isn't about domination, it's about choosing kindness even when the world tells you to choose cruelty." She looked at Colin, who was still holding his rifle like he might actually use it. "You think hanging him would have taught me to obey, but all it taught me is that you're cowards, every one of you, too scared to imagine a different world, too comfortable with your hatred to risk loving someone different." "That's enough," Mayor Harper said sharply, but his voice lacked conviction, and Genevieve saw the uncertainty in his face, the beginning of doubt. "It's not nearly enough," she countered, "because I'm not done. I'm not done fighting for this, for us, for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, love matters more than all your borders and treaties and carefully drawn lines." Pastor William stepped forward from where he'd been watching at the church steps. "The girl's right," he said quietly. "I've been thinking about this for 3 weeks, praying on it, and I keep coming back to the same scripture. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." If we're all one, then how can we justify this division? Oh, please. Colin lowered his rifle, but his face was twisted with contempt. "You're going to quote scripture at me after everything they've done? After everything we've done, you mean?" Pastor Williams met his glare without flinching. "I've been in this town for 30 years, Colin. I've watched us take Apache land and call it progress. I've buried settlers killed in raids and never asked why those raids happened. I've looked the other way while good people suffered because they weren't my people." He turned to the crowd. We all have. And it's time we admitted that maybe, just maybe, we're not the heroes of this story. Maybe we're the ones who need to change. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some angry, some thoughtful, some just confused. Change was terrifying, easier to cling to old hatreds than to imagine new possibilities. But Genevieve could see cracks forming in the certainty that had held Silver Creek together for so long. Mayor Harper unrolled the treaty document slowly, his hands shaking slightly. He read it in silence while everyone waited, while the sun climbed higher and shadows shortened and the future balanced on whatever words were written on that paper. Finally, he looked up. "This is generous," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "More generous than I expected. You're offering access to water sources, shared hunting grounds, protection agreements, in exchange for..." He scanned further down. "In exchange for peace and recognition of your sovereignty over the northern territories." "We don't want war," Nahali's mother said. "We never did. We just want to exist, to raise our children, to honor our ancestors. Is that really so much to ask?" Mayor Harper looked at his daughter, at Nahali, at the two of them standing together like they were the only solid thing in a world gone liquid with uncertainty. "And if I agree to this, if we sign this treaty and recognize your territory, what guarantee do I have that you'll keep your word? The same guarantee we have that you'll keep yours," E2 said. "None, just trust. And the hope that maybe we're all tired enough of dying that we'll try something different." The silence that followed felt like the held breath before a storm breaks. Genevieve squeezed Nahali's hand and felt him squeeze back both of them, caught in the same terrible hope that maybe, just maybe, this could work. "I need to consult with the council," Mayor Harper said finally. "This isn't a decision I can make alone." "Then consult." Nahali's mother gestured at her people. "We'll wait. We've gotten good at waiting." The council meeting lasted 2 hours. Genevieve wasn't allowed inside. Women weren't permitted at council meetings. Another rule she fully intended to break someday, but she waited outside the town hall with Nahali, their hands still linked, their futures hanging in balance. "If they say no," Nahali said quietly, "what will you do? Come with you." She said it without hesitation. "Leave Silver Creek. Leave my father. Leave everything. I'm not losing you again, Nahali. I can't. You'd give up your whole life, your home. My home is wherever you are." She looked at him, this man who'd changed everything about how she saw the world. "These past 3 weeks I've been half alive, going through motions, pretending the future mattered when all I could think about was the past. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be safe if safe means being without you." He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. "I love you. I've loved you since that day on the cliff, and I'll love you until the stars go dark. But Genevieve, if we run, we'll spend our lives looking over our shoulders, always hiding, always afraid. Is that really what you want? I want you, however I can have you." Before he could respond, the town hall doors opened. Mayor Harper emerged, followed by the council members. His face was impossible to read, too carefully, blank, too controlled. Genevieve felt her heart hammering so hard it hurt. "We've reached a decision," Mayor Harper announced. The crowd that had gathered pressed closer, hanging on his words. "After extensive discussion and considerable debate, the council has voted to accept the terms of the proposed treaty." A sound rippled through both groups, Apache and settlers alike, something between a gasp and a sigh, relief and disbelief mixed together. However, Mayor Harper continued, and Genevieve's brief hope curdled into fear. There was always a however, always a catch. "The council has stipulated several conditions. First, there must be regular meetings between Apache leadership and town leadership to address disputes. Second, any violations of the treaty by either side will result in immediate renegotiation. And third," he looked directly at Genevieve and Nahali, "third, there must be a visible symbol of this peace, something both sides can point to as proof that this alliance is real and lasting. The council has suggested a marriage between Miss Genevieve Harper and Nahali, son of—" He paused, realizing he didn't know Nahali's mother's name. "Tayan," Nahali's mother supplied. "Her name is Tayan. It means sunrise." "Between Miss Genevieve Harper and Nahali, son of Tayan," Mayor Harper finished. "Performed by both Apache and Christian traditions. A joining of not just two people, but two communities." The silence was absolute. Genevieve looked at Nahali. Nahali looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the same wild hope she felt rising in her chest. "They want us to get married," she said stupidly. "My father wants us to get married." "It's political," Nahali said, but he was smiling, actually smiling. "They're using us as propaganda." "I don't care," Genevieve turned to her father. "I don't care if it's political. I don't care if it's strategic. Yes, I'll marry him, today, right now, before you change your mind." "The council suggested a month," Mayor Harper said, "to give both sides time to prepare, to make it proper." "Proper," Genevieve laughed, slightly hysterical. "We've been in love for 3 years. We've survived a shooting, a jailbreak, and a near war, and now you want proper? Let them have their month," Nahali said softly. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Let them have their ceremony and their celebration. We've waited this long. We can wait a little longer." But his eyes said what his words didn't, that he was just as desperate as she was, just as terrified this was all a dream that would evaporate with the morning light. The month passed in a blur of impossible activity. Genevieve's house became a meeting ground, Apache women teaching her their marriage traditions, while Silver Creek women taught Apache girls how to sew the Christian-style dress that would be worn for the ceremony. Her father worked with Nahali's mother to plan a celebration that honored both cultures, and slowly, awkwardly, people who'd been enemies began to become something else. Not quite friends. Not yet. But not enemies anymore either. Colin Briggs left town 3 days after the treaty signing. Rumor had it he'd taken a position as marshal in some distant territory far from the constant reminder of everything he'd lost. Genevieve felt nothing when she heard the news. Not relief, not victory, not even pity. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd never have to see that cruel smile again. Margaret apologized properly with tears and genuine remorse. Genevieve forgave her because what else could she do? Holding grudges took energy she didn't have, and life was too short to waste on hatred when love was so much more interesting. The wedding took place on a clear October morning, 1 month to the day after the treaty signing. They held it in the space between worlds, not in Silver Creek proper, not in the Apache camp, but in the open valley where the willow tree still stood older and wiser than any of them. Genevieve wore 2 dresses, the white Christian gown her mother had been married in, and over it an Apache dress of soft deerskin decorated with blue beads that Nahali's mother had made. Nahali wore traditional Apache clothing with a vest that incorporated silver buttons from his grandfather's cavalry uniform, taken in battle and repurposed into something beautiful. Pastor Williams conducted the Christian ceremony. An Apache elder conducted the traditional ceremony, and somewhere in the mixing of languages and rituals and prayers, Genevieve Harper became Genevieve Harper, Nahali, and Nahali became simply her husband, and they both became something new. "Surrender to me," Nahali whispered as he kissed her at the ceremony's end. The same words that had started everything, but transformed now. Not domination, not submission, just trust. Just love. "I already have," she whispered back. They built their cabin in the valley equidistant from both Silver Creek and the Apache camp. It wasn't large, just 3 rooms and a porch that faced the mountains, but it was theirs. They planted a garden that first year, mixing vegetables from her father's seeds with herbs Nahali's mother taught them to cultivate. They raised horses that didn't know the difference between Apache and white, that just ran free across land that belonged to everyone and no one. The treaty held. Not perfectly, there were disputes, misunderstandings, moments when old hatreds flared and threatened to undo everything. But each time people pointed to the cabin in the valley, to the couple who'd risked everything for love, and remembered that peace was possible. Difficult, yes, requiring constant work and forgiveness and choosing hope over fear, but possible. Children came. First a daughter with Nahali's dark eyes and Genevieve's stubborn chin, then a son who looked like his grandmother Tyan and had his grandfather Thomas's gift for diplomacy. Then more, each one a bridge between worlds, each one proof that love didn't just survive, it multiplied. Genevieve's father never fully approved, but he came to dinner every Sunday, and he taught his grandchildren about railways and progress and ambition. Nahali's mother taught them about tracking and medicine and how to read the land. The children learned both languages, both histories, both ways of seeing the world. They were neither and both belonging everywhere and nowhere, perfectly comfortable in the contradiction. Years later, when Genevieve was old and silver-haired and sitting on that porch watching her grandchildren play, someone asked her if it had been worth it. All the pain, all the fighting, all the sacrifice. She'd looked at Nahali beside her, his hand still finding hers after all these decades, and smiled. "I was taught that love was supposed to be easy," she said. "That if it required work, it wasn't real. But that's the lie we tell ourselves to justify giving up. Real love, the kind that changes the world, is hard. It's choosing each other every single day, even when the world says you shouldn't. It's building bridges where everyone else sees walls. And yes, it's worth it. Every impossible, terrifying, beautiful moment of it." The legend of the mayor's daughter and the Apache warrior spread far beyond Silver Creek. Other towns pointed to their treaty as proof that coexistence was possible. Other young people took courage from their story and loved across the boundaries they'd been told were uncrossable. And slowly, painfully, the world began to shift, not because of politics or economics or military might, but because two people had stood in the middle of a battlefield and chosen love. Because they'd refused to accept that the world had to be the way it had always been. Because they'd believed stubbornly, impossibly beautifully, that surrender didn't mean defeat. Sometimes it meant freedom.